All right, NAR settlement, buyer agency. So a little bit about our sponsors, the agenda. I want to talk a little bit about recap about the NAR settlement, just what's happening, the timeline. Hopefully a lot of people have seen a lot of this multiple times. The more you hear it, the more you can internalize it and regurgitate it in front of clients. So we're going to go over a little bit of what happened, what's happening, what the timelines are. Then we're going to talk about buyer brokerage agreements, different types, different strategies, maybe how to identify who you are and which ones you might want to use or you should use and which strategies to deploy with each one. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and then some about the sales process around the buyer broker. So what scripting should I use, when should I use it, how should I transition, all those things. Bathrooms in the back if you haven't used yet. It has a barn door, which is a unique, I thought it was an interesting choice for a bathroom. There is a lock. Make sure you lock it. That's what I'll say about that. Networking immediately after. We're already starting late. I imagine this will go a little late. I want this to be as much of a discussion, questions, thoughts. If you've heard or read something you find valuable, please interject. Let's discuss and talk about it. A lot of this we'll get into. I'll talk more about it. No one really knows what's happening. This is very frustrating, and it's why everyone's kind of like desperate to come to events like this. And so what we're trying to do here is get people together and come up with good ideas that are, one, compliant, but two, easy to implement. And so that's what this is. We're all just guessing, but a lot of this is opinion and guesswork because there is no attorney that specializes in this. It's only 3 months old. We're all just kind of working together here. So hang out afterwards if you can. We're probably going to run late, but if you can, please. Questions. If you guys want to pull out your phone, scan this QR code. It'll take you to a website where you can ask questions. So you can keep it on your phone. I'll stop a couple times and ask for questions. But if you don't want to raise your hand and talk in front of everyone, or if you just don't want to forget it, type it in here, and then we'll periodically pull them up, talk about different questions. So it's there too. So when you scan it, click the button that says ask a question, type it, submit it, and then we'll pull it up. Oh, come on. There's supposed to be an image here. So we did an event at the end of May where we had the president of OAR, the chief legal counsel, the head legal counsel for OAR, the president of the MLS, and then we had the number one team leader in Oklahoma City and the number one team leader in Tulsa. Together they sell 1,600 houses a year, and we had them all together and had a panel. We talked about the changes, the legality around it, the rules, the regulation changes. Then we talked about sales process. What are these top high-producing, high-volume teams doing to comply? What are their thoughts about it? What are they doing in their own business? And so there's an hour video. I'm going to send this out to everyone so you can click that link. There's an hour video. I encourage you to go watch it. We talk a lot about it. We're just going to go through real quickly the NAR stuff here. So, uncertainty ahead. Has anyone seen headlines like this yet? For a while, they've calmed down, luckily, but I imagine they're going to pick back up shortly here. But real estate lawsuit settlement upends decade-long policies that set agent commissions. Selling homes about to get cheaper after this historic settlement. Yeah. And then 6% commission on buying and selling a home is gone after Realtor Association agrees to a seismic settlement. This is buildings falling, people dying, right? Seismic. So, headlines. Let's talk about what's really happening. So, actually, let me go back. First, the enemy here is not the attorneys, a little bit, but not the attorneys, not NAR, not MLS. It is misinformation. Right now, our enemy is misinformation. So, the more you can educate yourself and, again, educate clients, this stuff becomes irrelevant. So because this is out there, you need to be sharper. You need to be more confident and more educated so that you can overcome these things. And the only way you can grow in your confidence is to read everything you can about it. But that's not enough. You also have to talk to other people about it. Because if you just read everything, you're going to get misinformation. Or you're not going to be able to challenge your thoughts if all you're doing is reading stuff. And if all you're doing is talking to people, then you're not going to be able... You got it, Dan? Yeah. Okay. I want to make sure. So if you're just talking to people, then you're not going to be able, you're subject to the misinformation as well, and if you're just reading about it, you're not going to be able to get the different viewpoints, challenge your own thoughts and all that stuff as well. So read as much as you can and talk to as many people as you can about it. Industry professionals, not consumers who are reading this junk. So very important. Again, misinformation is our enemy here. So let's talk about what actually happened. So the old way, this is the way it worked for many, many years. A listing agent and a seller would sign a listing agreement. The listing agreement would outline the buyer's agent's commission and the listings agent's commission. It would be negotiated during the listing agreement. The listing broker would input it onto the MLS, where it would be centralized and disseminated to all the different buyer's brokers. And then the buyer broker might do a buyer-broker agreement with their buyer. They might do it in the very beginning. They might do it during the offer process. They might never do it at all, depending on how you practiced. Show of hands, who prior to all this did a buyer-broker agreement before showing houses to as many clients as they could? That was part of their standard practice. 50? Okay. 2 out of the 45. That's about 3 kind of out of the 45. So that's about what I've seen in talking to a lot of people. So here's what changed. You ready? That's it. That's what changed. The only difference is MLS cannot put the compensation, we cannot put the offer of compensation into the MLS, and you must sign a buyer-broker agreement. These are the only 2 changes that took place right here. Offer of compensation now has to be a phone call, which you should be calling the realtors before you write offers on everything anyway. So a phone call, and then a buyer-broker agreement is required now. And not even a buyer-broker agreement, a written agreement that has to have 4 mandatory provisions. So it's not even a buyer-broker agreement, and we'll talk about those too. So these are the only 2 changes right here. Now what the media wants you to think is this. This is what happened. Real estate's on fire, buyers are on fire, your brokerage is on fire, get out of the industry, we're all screwed. Seismic, right? This guy has experienced a seismic reaction. However, after trainings like this, we want you to be happy, right? So we're going to go from this guy to this guy. And if you came to my last training, I already used this joke, so that's probably why you're not laughing. But it was a really good joke, so I had to recycle it. I'm going to keep using it. All right, terms of the settlement agreement. Very simple, very basic. I say we, the National Association of Realtors gave $418 million. We're going to pay it out over 4 years. The attorneys get a third of that, so they'll get about $100 million or so. And then each plaintiff will get about $200, a couple $100 in there. So was it worth it? So what the settlement has is a release of liability for all NAR members. This is what they're hanging their hat on. Now, because we broke the law, now you're saved and you're not liable anymore because of all the stuff we did. So release of liability for all the NAR members. Remove buyer compensation from the MLS. We talked about that. Require a written agreement with a buyer prior to touring homes. And so touring homes is a term that has a meaning, and we'll go through that. Same with working with a buyer is a term that has a meaning. The NAR continues to deny any wrongdoing. And then agents versus real estate agents. So there are obviously, you can be a real estate agent without being a realtor. A lot of the changes that are coming through with OREC and all this other stuff has to comply with real estate agents in general. So you might see some stuff on documents that they push out or some other regulations with the law that don't necessarily comply with realtor, the new rules we have to comply with, and it's because we're not all the same. Realtors have to hold themselves to a higher standard and a lot of code of ethics and all that other stuff. So just because something is legal does not mean it's compliant with the NAR settlement. Does that make sense? 2 different things. So I see a lot of people trying to apply logic to all this stuff, and you can't do it. I was banging my head up against the wall thinking, why are they doing this? Doesn't make, if they want this, then why? And the reality is it's not like a bunch of people got in a room and said, how can we make this better? What happened was we got caught cheating, and now there's new rules we have to play by. That's what happened. So don't apply logic to it. Rules are not the same as complying with the NAR settlement either. So make sure you're complying with the NAR settlement. Timeline, most of this is in the past now. So June 18th, the MLS boards and large brokerages that were not included in the settlement had to opt into the settlement if they wanted. Our board chose to opt into the settlement. It's coming out larger boards across the country. Some of them are opting out. We don't really know what the repercussions of that are going to be yet. I assume there's going to be some legal action coming forward at some point. We opted in, so we must comply with these things. August 17th is a date you keep hearing. All the changes must be implemented in our MLS and in our brokerages and our buyer agreements and everything by August 17th. Another bit of misinformation I was hearing early on is, you see at the end there, November 26th, is the final approval, the hearing for the final approval. And so everyone's like, it might not even be approved. Why? We don't have to take action or do anything. It might not even be approved. That's not true. NAR is implementing these changes. It's required now by NAR to implement these. Whether this gets approved or not, these changes are going into effect August 17th. So don't think that we'll just sit around and it might not happen. NAR already made the decision. It's happening. So everyone has to comply. Okay, so the first part of that, of the things that are changing, written agreement. Again, a written agreement, will break down the definition of that, but or what's required of it. But a written agreement is providing brokerage services to a buyer. I'm sorry. When is a written agreement required? When you are providing brokerage services to a buyer, such as identifying properties, scheduling tours, negotiating or presenting offers by the buyer, or any other service to the buyer. So it excludes people that are providing services to the seller. So if you're the listing agent and someone wants to see your house, you don't need a buyer-broker agreement. If you're the listing agent or you're sitting in open house for the seller, you don't have to do a buyer-broker agreement. So it excludes people providing services to the seller. It is required, and this update just came out Tuesday, NAR just clarified this. If you are going into dual agency and writing an offer on your listing, you do have to do the written agreement with the buyer. So if you have a listing, they come show the house, you don't have to get anything, but when they say I want to write an offer, you have to do the buyer-broker agreement, outline your commission, outline all your duties, get it signed, check the box on the, check the boxes you have to check and all that. So they just provided clarification on their website on Tuesday on that. So dual agency does have to do it. Touring a home. A lot of people are asking this, when do I actually need it? Touring a home means providing an in-person or virtual tour on a residential property to a buyer, 1 to 4 units. So if you're showing multifamily, a 6-unit, 8-unit, not required. If you're showing a commercial property, retail property, not required. If you're doing virtual, it is required. In-person, it is required. So make sure you understand when this triggers. And these two things, when you're working with a buyer or when you're touring a home, is what triggers these two changes. This change is when you need a written agreement. So mandatory provisions of the written agreements. For sellers, there's mandatory provisions for sellers in your listings and buyers in your buyer brokers. So for listing agreements, and I feel like I'm going so fast, but I'm just trying to recap really fast and we'll slow down with the other stuff, I promise. I'm talking so fast, I'm getting dry mouth here. Okay, so the listing agreements must disclose in conspicuous language that broker commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. They must also disclose to the seller the amount of compensation being offered to the buyer's broker. So you may have noticed in January, OREC put out the new listing agreement that says how much I'm paying the buyer's broker and how much I'm going to keep. So it used to just say, what are you paying me? Now it says, what are you paying me? And here's what I'm going to give to the buyer's broker. That is part of all this. They saw it coming down the pipe. So you have to disclose to the seller the amount of the compensation you're giving to the buyer's broker. Also, all active listings without contracts must have these starting August 17th. So if you got a listing that you signed today and it doesn't go under contract by August 17th, you need to make sure that your listing agreements are in compliance. If you've been using the OREC one since January, it probably will be in compliance. But if you haven't been, or if you've listed it for 7 months, you'll have to comply. So starting anything active without a contract must comply with the new mandatory provisions for the listing agreements. Mandatory provision for the buyer. So there's 4 mandatory provisions that the NAR settlement requires in all written agreements. It doesn't have to be a buyer broker, you can call it whatever you want, but there's 4 mandatory provisions. First one is you must specify and conspicuously disclose the amount or rate of compensation the agent will receive from any source or how the amount is determined. So what am I getting paid? Very simple. Second, the amount of compensation must be objectively ascertainable and must not be open-ended. So it's kind of the same thing. You cannot say whatever the seller offers. So the old buyer-broker agreement, we'll talk about in a minute, used to have an option that says, I'll just take whatever the seller offers. Cannot do that anymore. It is not ascertainable, and it is open-ended. So it must be ascertainable and open-ended, and not open-ended. The third mandatory provision include a statement that the agent may not receive compensation from any source that exceeds the amount of rate agreed to in the buyer. So this, once you say what you're going to get, you cannot make any more money than that. So if you say I'm going to get 3% and they're offering a selling bonus or a 4%, you cannot take it. There are ways around that. We're going to talk about that in our strategy session, but according to these, there has to be a statement in there that says I cannot take more than I am telling you I'm going to charge. The fourth one, disclose in conspicuous language that broker commissions are not set by law and fully negotiable. Same just like the listing agent. So these are just statements that have to be in your written agreement. So you can write your own agreement, and I wrote some for our brokerage, and as long as it has these 4 mandatory provisions, your agreement is in compliance. Doesn't mean it's legal, doesn't mean it's a good agreement, but it's in compliance with the NAR settlement. So you want to make sure it's all those things if you're going to write one. But these are the 4 mandatory provisions. And then the last thing, active buyer agreements must be amended. So OREC just came out last week with their, last week with their new buyer broker service agreement. If you're using an old one and it doesn't have all these provisions, by August 17th you need to put a new buyer broker agreement with them, with your buyers. You'll be out of compliance if you're using the old buyer broker agreement on August 17th. So anyone that's not under contract and a buyer you're working with that has an agreement, they need to have the updated one. Okay, some FAQs that I've heard and seen and read, and hopefully other people have seen and read and heard these as well, but I like to touch on them. Do I need a BBA when hosting an open house or showing my own listing? Again, we talked about that. No. If you're performing activities for the seller, you do not need a buyer broker agreement unless it turns into dual agency where you're writing the offer for them, then you do. But open houses, showings, even in your own broker. If I have a listing and Tim goes and shows it, he is performing a seller for the brokerage, for a duty for the seller under the brokerage. He does not need a buyer broker for that. If he writes an offer, then he would need one. Does that make sense? Where can I advertise buyer agent commission? This seems to be the biggest thing people are trying to get cute and like how can we make things the same but not the same? If you have to ask, don't do it, is my advice. I feel like the powers that be are going to be looking to throw the book at people initially because of the scope of the lawsuit. So don't be one of the people who gets trying to get cute and get caught and get slapped with fines, because it's going to be at least, I don't know if they've announced it yet, it's going to be at least $2,500 minimum per incident. So if I show 10 houses to this buyer, 2,500 times 10 is how they're going to fine you. So don't, and they're not going to be lenient because you can't not know the rules of this thing. So, so be careful with that. So where can I advertise buyer agent commission? Literally anywhere except for the MLS or MLS affiliated technologies. So you can put it on your brokerage website, your personal website. You can put it on signs. I've been seeing stuff float around Facebook of people putting buyer broker friendly or whatever cute language they want to put out there on signs, flyers, social media posts. If you want to make a social media post and say new listing, you can put buyer agent compensation offered. It just cannot be centralized and disseminated on the MLS or MLS provided technologies. So showing time, can't put it in showing time. You can't create an auto email that goes out whenever someone shows a house that says we offer 3%. Can't do that. It's part of the MLS. So literally anywhere except for the MLS or the MLS technologies. What happens if I don't comply? So a lot of people are like, why don't we just leave NAR? Why do we have to put up with this? I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to do it the old way, all these things. The problem is you become personally liable. You open yourself up to be personally sued for this settlement. Angelina Harris, who's our president of the MLS, she's been on every Zoom call that's been available for the last 6 months with every organization that's wanted to do a Zoom call. And she has said multiple times that these attorneys got a big payday. And so they're hiring people to go onto Facebook groups and go communicate with agents and try to catch people breaking this settlement so that they can fire up a new lawsuit. They made $100 million. And so they're going to do stuff like this again, potentially. That's what I was told. So by trying to circumvent the lawsuit, you are opening yourself up to personal liability. Your E&O insurance won't cover you because you're breaking the rules. The settlement won't cover you because you went around the settlement terms. You'll be personally liable. Probably not worth it. Just everyone else is playing by these rules. Just play by the rules. At the bottom of all these, I've been putting these links too. So NAR has an FAQ page and a bunch of resources. So it's where I'm getting all these things. You can refer back to them as well. Okay, that was the recap of the NAR settlement. Really, really high level, basic stuff, hopefully not too dense. We're only about a third of the way through this thing, so I hope I haven't lost you guys yet. Any questions? Let me pull up and see if anyone's been saying anything yet. Anyone want to yell out a question?
So on social media, when you're posting it on stories, can you actually say X amount that is offered, or you have to use the term that you said, compensation friendly?
No, you can advertise what the compensation amount is, as long as it's not on the MLS or any MLS technology. So you can say, check out my new listing, offering 3% to buyer's agents. Now,
if you link the MLS listing, is that okay?
Yes, because it's still not on the MLS. Yeah,
Just double check.
yeah. So I would, most people that are seeing, hopefully you're posting stories for consumers, not necessarily for other agents. So I don't know if I'd put them on stories or maybe flyer posts and stuff like that. My thought process is if we can put it somewhere consistent where if I see a listing, I know, oh, this person might have posted it on Facebook or this person might have put it on their website, and you can kind of start to know where to go find it. There will be new norms created every month for the next 18 months. So you might have to work a little bit, guys. I know realtors hate hearing this. Have to look around a little bit. Don't be what everyone thinks we are, right? Pick up the phone, call, have conversations. You should be doing these things already. Good question. Yes, Ms. Lisi.
On August 17th, is MLS going to pull our listings down? Are they just going to delete that section?
The field will be not visible.
Okay.
So you don't have to do anything.
The 13th is when our MLS is doing it.
It's going to implement it on the 13th?
That's
Okay.
what I keep saying unless they changed it.
Yeah. It makes sense they do it a few days before.
Okay, so we don't have to take them down.
No, they'll do it. Sorry. The cooperative compensation agreement is mandatory. Will be best practice in those entitles any contract. Good question. We're going to talk about the cooperative compensation agreements later on. They are not mandatory. That's probably going to be a best practice. And this is a new document that OAR just created last week. We'll talk about strategies around that, but it's not going to be mandatory. It'll probably be a best practice, though. We'll go over that. Are the buyer-broker agreements going to be presented to listing agents when making an offer? I haven't received clarification on this. So our buyer-broker agreement is going to have to be presented to listing agents when making offers. This is kind of what's weird, and I don't think you can ask for that, and I wouldn't recommend giving it. Per the guideline, per the settlement, you cannot receive more money than you agree to in your buyer-broker agreement. So as a listing agent, it's reasonable for me to say, hey, how much did you ask your buyer for? Because if it's less than what I'm offering, I could give it back to my seller, I could keep it, something can happen with it. So how's that going to work? I don't know. Because if you ask me for my buyer-broker agreement, I'm going to tell you to go pound sand. Just like if I asked you for your listing agreement, you're going to say no thank you. So I don't know how that's going to work. I think what this is going to be is on the honor system for a while. Title companies have no interest in checking buyer agreements.
Say what honor system?
Yeah.
That's not the integrity.
Yeah.
And don't yell at us if we did.
And because this could be real money that could go to someone else, seller, buyer, listing agent. So we don't know yet. This is one of those things where we don't know yet. I wouldn't go around asking people for their agreements though, because they're going to tell you no, or I'll ask for yours, and we're probably not going to do that. Probably not wise. So the answer to this is I don't know. We will find out.
Thank you.
Yes.
Other people teaching, this is how it's going to be.
Nah.
But we're all interpreting it. That's why I keep saying give it the 18 months.
Yeah, has to be.
We're going to have to roll through it, and there's going to be a lot of changes.
Yeah, that's where,
We're doing 6 months, people. Let's figure it out.
Yeah, hurry. Yeah, do some volume. So, all the changes are going to kind of be like a pendulum, right? It's like there's going to be some extremes, and it's going to go this way, and we're going to all require this, and this is going to happen, and then about 18 months, it's going to settle kind of on a new norm. And we don't know what it looks like yet. And it might be just like what we're doing now, might be completely different, but something will settle, and we'll all kind of know what the rules are going forward. But anyone who says they know is trying to sell you something. No one knows. We're all guessing.
In your opinion, since you said you wouldn't give them that, is there a reason you wouldn't want them to see that?
It's not their agreement.
I
No.
understand, but we're supposed to all be kind of matching
Yeah.
that number we've agreed to. So is there, like, do you have a hard, fast reason you wouldn't want them to see it?
No. Because they're not a member to the they're not a party to the contract.
Yeah, it's our fiduciary duty to keep it.
To not share it. Yeah. Same reason you wouldn't share a purchase agreement with another buyer. And,
Otherwise, they don't. Okay.
yeah. Yes.
I've heard other brokerages saying like that you have to do. You have to then give
Share the BBA?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that from other agents. Yeah.
I have not seen or heard anyone say that you have to give your agreement to someone else.
They specifically brought that up to Angelina at the
And they said no.
conference, and she said,
Yeah.
no.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not required.
It's not their agreement.
They're not a party to the contract.
That's confidential information between you and your buyer. and
Correct.
you'll have to keep stuff like that confidential.
That is my understanding.
I think it's important to note too that people are still going to ask you for it because
Yeah.
not every agent in the metro is in this room right now. So some agent out there is going to get a bug up their butt and think that they know what they're talking about, and they're going to be like, "You have to send me that."
Here's
Like an agent asking why they're selling.
Yeah, here's my probably, and I haven't thought through this. I'm doing it right now, so hopefully it's not stupid. I am going to say no, thank you. However, I'm not going to cost my buyer the house because I don't want to be right. You know, I'm not going to be right. So I'll say no. If there's multiple offers, it's just like if someone's like, send me your multiple offer form. Those aren't necessary. But if there's multiple offers, I'll play ball, right? Stuff like that. So I'm going to say no initially. If I feel like I need to, I don't want to create any kind of, friction is my buzzword. You'll see we'll use the word friction about 50 times. I don't want to create any friction in this process. So blame your broker, blame your team leader, whatever. Just say I was advised by my broker not to share these. If they're like, I need it, won't present your offer without it, talk to me, your broker. Let's figure out a way to do it. But that's how that's my thought process right now. What's that? Blame Brett. I went to this thing one time.
When you're placing an offer, if you decide, well, you should be doing it now, that new compensation, that solves the problem right there. So you don't have to.
Yeah. Yes. So yeah, you do, and we'll talk about strategies that can kind of get around these things.
Hello, broker.
Yes.
Would you suggest in an instance like that, though, that you make sure that you're transparent with your buyer that it's being shared?
If you're going to share.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Just from a transparency, quick text or email. Hey,
Yeah.
they
It's
requested
so immaterial to them.
Right.
But yeah, you're sharing. Yeah. Yes.
It's whenever it comes to money.
Yeah. And it's in an attempt to prevent them from paying.
Sure.
It's to maximize your compensation and prevent them from paying anything.
Quick, I asked them, they said it was okay.
Yeah. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe.
In
Yeah.
terms of our conversation, like the whole point in this is because agents were not explaining how they're getting paid.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just full transparency across the board, even if they don't understand it, this is why we are in this business, because that's the
Yeah.
mistake. And we're like, wait, how did you get paid?
Yeah.
And then, so
Yeah.
just full
And you're
transparency.
talking about in terms of telling your buyer that we're
I wouldn't
yeah.
second guess it. I don't
Yeah.
think it's something that they should be privy to.
Yeah,
Right?
that's good.
Right.
Yes. I assume that was you, Della? Okay. Yes, we answered that. So yeah, if you can post it on social media. You can say the amount, you can say all that stuff on social media. Good question. Good discussion, guys. I'm excited. Continue to text the questions in. That was great. Good questions. Again, I have another spot. We're gonna do more discussion. I thought that was good. So we're gonna talk about buyer broker agreements now. So a couple different types of agents. I'm gonna try to create like a framework for you guys. What do I believe? How do I practice? And then maybe what kind of agreements should I use? And then what are some strategies around those agreements? That's kind of the idea that I want to zoom in on. So different types of agents, types of agreements, and we're going to talk about strategies. So word of the day, friction. The goal is to reduce friction. Friction is any force that is resisting motion, okay? So if I have a buyer and they want to see a house and I throw a big fat contract in between it before they can go look at it, I'm creating friction. Now maybe it's a little bit of friction, maybe it's a lot of friction, but creating this is creating friction. And I want to try to reduce it. I think the people, if we're not careful and we make this too complicated and too difficult, we're going to drive buyers straight into listing agents' arms. And it's not because there's a lack of demand for buyer agents. People want buyer agents, but they don't want to do this kind of stuff. So reduce the friction, streamline it, create processes, automations, make it easy. And I think you're going to have more success. You're going to get more opportunities. Friction. All right, what type of agent are you? So I've been canvassing agents. I've talked about 25 agents or so. Medium, high producing agents, trying to find out what type of agent were you? Where on this sliding scale or this spectrum were you? Were you, I never did a buyer broker agreement, or I did them when I wrote the offer, or I didn't show a house without doing a buyer consult and doing a BBA. So we're going to do a poll. Who never did one ever prior to this? Okay, about a third. Who did them at contract? Okay, most. And then who didn't do anything till they did a consult and a try to? Okay, try to. Okay, so yeah, you're about right there. That's consistent with all the other people I've talked to. That's good. You guys are going to love this next part. All right, so types of enforcement. What type of agent are you? One, I'll never make my buyer pay. I have a philosophical reason. I feel bad. I don't want to do it. Or, depends on the circumstance. This guy was really tough, and I'm going to get my money out of this, right? I always collect. We're going to do a poll. Who is never going to make their buyer pay? Not a lot. Okay. Who depends on the circumstance? And then who always collects? Chris. Yeah. Pay me. Yeah. So these are kind of the types of enforcements and the types of operations that I see most people on this sliding scale. So I created a matrix. I'm a very visual person. I have to put everything into pictures. So there's 9 different types of agent variation where you might fall based on the two questions you answered. So I think, most people are going to sit 2 and 5 probably. I can't remember. No, it's on the next one. So we're going to talk about different types of agreements that someone in each quadrant, or not quadrant, each box might want, and then kind of strategies around each, where you are based on what you should probably want, might be easiest for you. So types of written agreements. I'm going to talk about 3 types. Basically, the OREC buyer service agreement, the full 4-page, whatever you want to call it, and then a hybrid full service agreement that we created, and then a touring only agreement that we created, and kind of different strategies around those. So the first one, the OREC buyer service agreement. Who sat on the hour and a half webinar last week with OREC? Did everyone find it as informative and helpful as I did? Sarcastically? Okay. They just read it. Yeah. They read it to me very slowly. So, a couple things, pros and cons about it. Pros, it's issued by OREC. Your E&O insurance loves when you use state-issued documents. Your broker probably loves when you use state-issued documents. Creates a lot more coverage because if someone messes up, it normally means a bunch of people have messed up. It includes the mandatory provisions, obviously, creates exclusivity, has longer term durations, and it addresses compensation amounts. So a bunch of pros. Does everything it needs to and should do. Some cons are there's a significant amount of disclosure statements in there that are unnecessary and I think create roadblocks for our agents. And secondly, it was odd, unique. They added a 3-day termination clause to it, and they didn't have that prior. I thought that was weird. So used to, it would default, or it didn't default at all. Now, if you leave it blank, I think it's 90 days, but it has a 3-day out. So you used to have to put an end date, and it didn't have an out. You're just in it. Now, if you give your realtor written notice, you can get out of your agreement in 3 days.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
I didn't understand where it came from. Like there was nobody said, and this is why we decided to put this.
I asked, and they ignored me. Typed it up. So I wonder if it's because they suspect buyers aren't going to know, and they're going to sign an agreement with you, and then they're going to go out on Sunday and sign one with you, and then they're going to go out on Tuesday and sign one with you, and they're going to need a way out of those 3. That's what I suspect. And if you're the agent of those three who provides the most value, hopefully you're the one that doesn't get the 3-day notice. That's kind of my thought. We'll see. So pros and cons. I think there's a significant more amount of cons than there are pros on this one. I think it discloses a bunch of stuff it doesn't need to. I think it takes 20 lines to say what could have taken 2 lines, and all kinds of stuff. So I'm not a fan of this. This is my opinion. This is not legal advice. This is my opinion. So we're going to go through them a little bit more. So the changes. I'm just going to talk about the changes from the old buyer broker, OREC buyer broker, to the new OREC buyer broker. So they added paragraph 2, entering an agreement. So this basically acknowledges, it kind of gives, I do kind of like this because it gives you something to point to that says, hey, this is required. Everyone's going to need to do this, so I'm not different. This isn't unique to me or my brokerage. So it just says they understand they have to enter into this agreement before showing any house with any realtor or with any agent, which is not true because this is just a realtor change, but they added it to the entire OREC document. So it was interesting they added that. Section 4, buyer affidavit. In November, I think, our state legislators passed a law that says if you're a non-U.S. citizen, you cannot buy real estate in Oklahoma. You have to sign an affidavit at closing. They threw that in there for some reason. Do they disclose the other 50 documents we sign at closing? No, but they threw that one in there. So that's one more thing to talk about, right? 6, termination agreement. Interesting. They give you everyone a 3-day out. Now, I suppose you could strike through it, but that's a different conversation you got to have with the client too. Like, I don't want you to have a 3-day out. So it talks about, they mentioned this twice, if they do fire you, or you do get your 3-day notice, but then they go on to buy a house that you showed them for 60 days, you have claim of that commission. Now, what I don't know, like if you read the listing agreement, it says if you fire me and then sell it within X days, you owe me money unless you sign a new agreement with a new realtor. Then they don't owe you any money. That language is not here. So if they fire you, go buy a house that you showed them with another agent that they entered into an agreement with. I don't know how that will be. I don't know if the new agreement is null or if you guys got to do a cage match. I don't know yet. We're going to find out. But gives you a 3-day out, and it protects your commission for 60 days on properties that you showed them. So, interesting. Section 7, compensation. So this one, they added a bunch of stuff. So this is where they took away the option to just accept whatever the seller is offering. There used to be an option C that said, I will accept whatever the seller or the seller broker is offering. They took that away. That is open-ended and non-ascertainable, apparently. So they took that away. Option, and then they switched option A and B for some reason, I guess just to justify their attorney fees or something. So they switched A and B. So A is, I'm going to charge you X dollars or a percentage at closing. It adds a sentence, I think this was in the last one, but it basically says you, the buyer, are going to receive a credit towards my commission in the amount that the seller is offering me. So if I'm charging you 3%, but they're offering me 3%, you get a credit for that 3%, so you don't owe me anything. Or if I'm charging 3 and they're only offering 2, you get a credit for 2, you owe me 1. Does that make sense? So it's giving them a credit for whatever the seller is offering, which draws, begs the question, is that ascertainable and open-ended? I think that it is, but they didn't. Section B, you can charge a retainer. I recently met with a brokerage who does retainer fees and commissions on every buyer agreement, which is, I've never heard of that. 11 years, never heard of that. So they take $250 retainer up front for their time and then 3% at closing. So it's like a transaction fee, but it gets paid up front. Interesting. So you can check box A and B and charge both of those. And then option C is anything else that is compliant that breaks down your commission. You can add any other structure or way to charge them that you want as long as it complies with the 4 mandatory provisions, which is not open-ended, ascertainable, and cannot receive more than what's on this statement. Also, I've been advised this is where you want to put transaction fees in C. So check the box. So if you're charging a retainer, a commission, and a transaction fee, you're checking box A, B, C, and you're putting something in all of them. That's where, in C, in other, yeah. So my agreement has a spot for it though, so I'll show you that. Again, it mentions the same thing unless it's otherwise stated, you owe me the commission at closing. And then if you buy something that I showed you within 60 days after firing me, you owe me. I'm entitled to that commission. So it states that twice, but that's in there. Section 8, failure to close.
Could you go back that for 1 second?
You betcha. It's a big TV. You guys got a good look at it. I like it. And then everyone's going to get a copy of this too. So I'll email this out to everyone. So Section 8, they added this paragraph: failure to close. It's a good paragraph. I don't know if it's terribly necessary. It's probably something you should have a discussion with, but I think it kind of just goes in line with normal practices. Basically, if the contract busts and it's not my buyer's fault, my buyer doesn't owe me any money. If the contract busts and it is my buyer's fault, buyer still owes me commission. I think it just paints a scenario that's never going to happen. If buyer breaches on purpose, you're probably not going to get money from them. There's probably some sort of hardship or some sort of life. There's probably something, right? It just feels unnecessary. So there might be a situation where you have like a high net worth individual, and it's an expensive property, and the commission is a material amount of money, that maybe you try to enforce this. But I think this is a scenario that you'll just never probably run into. I don't think, but they added it. Section 9, this is the fun section. This is the section that I almost just stopped reading it and didn't even keep going. Compensation to broker by seller. So this has a couple of the mandatory provisions built into it. The main piece, so we'll just go through it. It says the listing broker or seller is not required to pay the compensation. So again, we got in trouble because sellers said they are required to pay buyers, which per MLS guidelines they are. They have to pay us something. The MLS rules required that seller offered them something. You couldn't negotiate it. The other thing is you couldn't negotiate with the service provider. So sellers were getting charged a fee that they couldn't negotiate. That's the whole crux of the lawsuit. So they added a paragraph or a sentence there that says you don't owe anyone anything. And then there's a couple options that they lay out to make your life more difficult. So option A, seller offers equal to the compensation. So if the seller offers 3%, you're charging your buyer 3%, then I can't charge my buyer anything extra. I'm going to get what they offer, and I can't charge anyone else anything more. Option B is if the seller's offer is greater. This is the interesting part. So they outline it and they underline it here. This is the main section. Compensation to the buyer's broker must not exceed compensation agreed to between the buyer. So this is where someone could point at this sentence and say you have to prove to me what you're charging. Again, we talked about that a minute ago. And then it goes on to give them a couple of ideas. Like, hey, here's some things you could talk about. And one of them is you could give the money back to me as the buyer. 2 is we can give it back to the seller, which I don't want to do that. I'm the buyer. Why would I give the money back to the seller? And 3 is we can come up with some other option. So I thought this is all unnecessary. This is something that could probably be done in a verbal conversation, not in writing. Because if you present to a buyer that there's an option where I can give you part of my commission, I feel like that's going to be on the table now. Now that's on the menu, and we're going to go to it anytime we feel like we need a little bit of extra money. I think it needs. I don't agree with that. I also think it's really close to rebating and buyer inducement. I don't know how they, got around that. So just an interesting paragraph that I don't think is necessary. Anything, whatever you pick at. So if you change it, it all has to be agreed to in writing. Seller's offer is less than compensation. This is where it says if I charge you 3% and seller's only giving me 2%, you're on the hook for the other 1%. And it just says that. Again, I think this undercuts your ability to negotiate in the moment, and it gives them ideas that may or may not be feasible or may not be in their best interest. And so I think the whole paragraph is too much. At the end of so you may have noticed I was confused. I had to look this up. Why they put the disclosure of brokerage services on the last page. They passed a law. The disclosure of brokerage services has to be included anytime you enter into a contract to purchase. In OREC's opinion, their stance is that a buyer-broker agreement is a contract to purchase. I don't agree with that either, but they do. They put it on there. So anytime you get a buyer-broker agreement signed, you also have to get the disclosure of brokerage duties. You have to get this document signed as well. We normally just do it at the time of contract. But now you have to do it at the time of the buyer-broker agreement. So this is what they quoted me. So it has to be disclosed that the broker shall and be confirmed in writing and attached to contract of purchase. It's their opinion that this is a contract to purchase. So if you do create your own buyer broker or your own written agreements, make sure it has this attached to it, because it is OREC's opinion that a written agreement is now a contract to purchase. Heads up there. Some other supporting documents, the Cooperative Compensation Supplement. So someone mentioned, did you have something? Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, yeah. So Cooperative Compensation Supplement. So the settlement changes created a unique situation where I was struggling with this, and when they came out with this, I think it solved the problem. But there could be a scenario where the buyer or the listing agent is offering some compensation, but it's not all of it that I need, and I want to get all 3%, so I have to do a comp agreement to the seller and a co-op agreement to the buyer's agent. And I actually have to have 2 agreements to get my full 3% or my full 2% or whatever it is I want to get. And this kind of changes that, and I think that's where we're talking about best practices might be, you just throw this, or at least this language, on every contract. And then that way you don't have to ask, you don't have to go negotiate with 2 different people for the same amount of money, if that makes sense. If you put it on this, it says the seller's going to pay it, and it says it's going to be credited in the sales price, and then basically the listing agent just credits that money back to the seller, and the seller pays me on the settlement statement. Does that make sense to everybody? Terribly confusing. So the idea, again, so say, let me try to, I do a buyer agreement for 3%, the seller only offers 2, the listing agent only offers 2. I want my full 3, so I got to get a co-op agreement for the 2, because that's not written anywhere now. I have to get it in writing. It's not on the MLS. So I have to get a co-op agreement for the 2, and then I have to get a comp agreement for the 1. Does that make sense? From the seller, because 2 different people are paying me money, the seller and the broker. So this gets rid of both of those and does one cooperative compensation agreement. They combine them and just take it from the seller. Does that make sense? So they just kind of combined everything. It's like, here's everything I'm owed. You guys figure out how to pay me.
So if you're receiving concessions to pay for your fees, you wouldn't need this in place, correct? Because basically your buyer's going to receive it, and then the buyer broker is going to have your buyer pay you?
Chris, you don't ever, when you ask agents for like their DA or something, you never verify any of that, do you? You don't ask for a buyer broker or a listing agreement?
Not now, we don't, but this has been a discussion we've been having for quite a while.
Because the seller sees it, seller signs it. It's not like I'm going to squeak in an extra % or anything.
Yeah,
but I've seen that.
Almost never, ever happens, but agents and buyers and sellers don't actually look at the settlement statement before we send it out. That doesn't happen really.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, that's kind of our concern right now, if we're going to get stuck in the crosshairs.
Yeah, I'm sure you will.
Right.
Yeah.
So this particular document is between the buyer and the seller. So if you haven't been using it, it kind of gives everybody a clear idea, from what I understand. And I've been using this since it came out. So the seller has already agreed with the selling agent how much they're going to compensate you for. So if it's 3%, great. If it's 2%, you already know that, because one, you've had a conversation with that seller on the phone to find out what the compensation is. Your buyer agreement with the buyer is going to tell you whether you've already agreed to them, whether you ask them to pay you 4%, 7%, whatever the percentage is that you've asked that buyer to pay. The difference now is that when we send it to the title company, Abby does this, she sends over the compensation agreement that's been signed so that the title company knows how much we're getting paid. If it's different than what the buyer agreement says, she sends over the buyer agreement so that everybody is clear. I think we're just going to have to be that way.
So this is part of the contract. This is a supplement to the contract. So title company will receive this. It's because as we go on to the next one, they modified. Oh man, there we go. You can't see it. They added. So a lot of people use this whole section incorrectly, and I've always found it fascinating. But these are the things that are attached to the contract. So if title company receives a contract and there's a box checked, they're going to ask where that document is if you didn't provide it. So when you do a cooperative compensation supplement, you have to check that box, and title is required to get it. Oh, she left. Where'd Della go? So yeah, this is part of the contract. Title will receive it, and it will create a little more transparency. That's what it all comes down to. The reality is most buyers aren't going to want to write a check So commission's likely going to come out of equity of the home, the way it's always has. We just have to structure it the right way in all of our documents. That's kind of the bottom line of it. Yeah.
Can you go back to that possibility real quick? So the top line is the property address. It goes in that box right there. The property address again is twice? The property address again.
Oh, yeah.
For a few documents.
Yeah, it's an OREC.
Sure.
So OREC, yeah, so it's a supplement to the contract. So the contract, at the top of every I cut it off. So at the top of every contract document, it makes you put it to make sure that each page goes with the previous page. So this is a supplement to so this is page 8 of a 7-page document technically. So you have to make sure it ties with the contract.
Have your seller sign this, like at a listing appointment, like and then
Yes.
showing time, get that, email it over.
Yes, not through showing time. But yes,
like,
yes,
your email
yeah.
address.
So Tulsa, I've talked with a handful of Tulsa agents. A bunch of Tulsa brokerages have implemented a ton of changes already. And so yes, some brokerages have created their own, where anytime someone shows a house, they just get texted a confirmation of seller compensation. I can't remember what they called it, but it's basically just saying, here's what they're offering. I'm confirming that they're offering you 3. If you want more, ask for more. If you want less, ask for less, but here's what they're offering. So you can do that. It's more manual, but you can do that. And we're going to talk about scenarios going forward to really jumble your mind. And I'm hearing a lot of people say that they're not going to tell you what the sellers are offering. One of the largest brokerages in the country just came out and said they're not going to negotiate it at all. So we'll talk about that. Sit tight. Don't go anywhere. So again, I think, so one thing I'm doing, I think what I'm going to implement in my brokerage, my agents encourage is, again, OREC took 12 lines to say what could have been said in 2. And so I think in the additional provisions, I'm going to put, what I put down here. I don't have it. I wrote it down somewhere else. Basically, I'm going to get paid this. I'll get paid at closing. And that's it. It's 2 lines that says all of these things. And it's going to be in the additional provision. It's not one more document that needs to get added on. Because they made it a part of the contract, so now we'll make it a part of the contract, but cleaner.
If you put in section 13, you don't have to check that box?
Correct. It's not a supplement, yeah. You only check these boxes when there's another document attached. It's not terms, it's just document attached.
Cash.
It's not cash. Thank you. I didn't want to call anyone out. There is no cash addendum. Doesn't exist. Okay. All right. This is the disclosure part. Everyone pay attention. Everything that we're about to do from here is my opinion. These are documents I've created. These are not legal advice. You can use them if you would like, but if you have another broker, talk to your broker. Now, what I do, my strategy is I like to provide value and build rapport and build relationships. And if I can do that, I don't feel like I need documents to guarantee my payment. So this is my strategy. Again, we talked about the different variations. So the documents I've created make it easier and quicker to build rapport, provide value, build a relationship, but at the risk of creating more gaps that can prevent me from getting paid. So every single line and disclosure on every agreement OREC puts out is because there was a lawsuit or a complaint or something. That's what creates paragraphs and contracts. So I took a lot of those out. It's not going to create more liability for you. It's simply going to create more gaps to where it might be more difficult to collect commission. Does that make sense? But if you do a good job, provide value, build rapport, I'm of the opinion you're going to be compensated fairly. So that's what I'll say. So weigh the risk and the reward. The risk is I create more gaps to not get paid potentially, but the reward is I'm going to get way more opportunities. I think there's going to be a lot of people that try to do sit-down consultations with buyers that just want to see houses. I think they're going to lose opportunities. And so I'm trying to get as many opportunities as I can because I know I can convert opportunities into closings. So does everyone understand what that means, right? Okay. These are documents I've created. I believe they are good documents. I'm going to implement them. We've had attorneys look at them. They comply, but I am not everyone's broker in here. Talk to your broker. Okay. So the first one was the full OREC buyer-broker agreement. Use that. You're going to be fine. It creates a bunch of roadblocks, a bunch of awkward conversations, much more difficult sales process, I think. Use it if you want. We created a hybrid full-service agreement. So this couple of benefits. This agreement is specific to your brokerage and your buyer needs. It's full service, allows me to do everything I can do underneath the OREC agreement, includes all the mandatory provisions. It's a minimum length to reduce friction, buzzword, write it down. Creates exclusivity, has duration, termination, is flexible, outlines compensation, and is significantly less disclosures. Again, reduces friction, makes it easier to get agreements, easier sales process when you're in front of a client, less to talk about, but you're still talking about the mandatory parts and the parts that are actually material to the buying process. So, we're going to click on them. We're going to go through a couple things. Maybe. Buyer need analysis, discussing finances, scheduling and touring properties, preparing offer contracts, negotiating contracts terms, coordinating closing process, and telling funny jokes. So I put this on there because I'm trying to keep this a little unbuttoned a little bit. This is a legal document. You sign it, you agree to it. But we're about to go into a tougher conversation. For, again, you saw the hands that went up. Vast majority of people never did these. So I'm trying to remove the roadblocks, reduce the friction. So if this is in your personality to tell a funny joke and giggle, put it in there. If it's not, remove it. Don't put it in there. Some people can't tell jokes, you know. Some people. So these are the services. It's everything. It includes everything. I also put it includes, but is not limited to. So these are buyer broker services. Buyer acknowledges that they are not already in a written buyer broker agreement. I think this is... The reason that's in there is because if they are, you have a right to say you entered into this contract in bad faith and I can go collect my commission. Again, I'm not going to do that probably, but I put it in there for adequate, more protection, it's more teeth. And so if I put something in here, it's for one of two reasons. One, I think it sets expectations properly, or it protects us. So this is a conversation you should have. This says you're not in another agreement. Are you? Correct? Have you met with anyone? Have you signed anything else? It sets that expectation and allows you to protect yourself. Duration of agreement, very simple. Starts on this date, ends on this date. I did a 90 days if left blank. And I said it expires with a 3-day notice as well. I typically, most of the agreements I do, listing agreements, buyer agreements, are 24-hour agreements. It's day to day. Fire me if you don't like me. Since everyone else is doing 3 by using the OREC agreement, I thought let's be on the same field. We'll just do 3. It's easier, it's more, but everyone else is doing it, so it's fine. So you can fire me with 3-day notice. 3-day notice. Compensation of broker. Pulled this directly from the OREC one. Says you can pay me a flat fee or a commission at close. So I added the language that I have from the listing paperwork, which I don't know why it's not on the buyer side. But so it says you're going to pay me X percent plus X dollars. That's where your transaction fee goes if you have one, or a flat rate of X. And then I put buyer will receive a credit towards the commission based on whatever the seller is offering me. Same language there. Option B is you're going to pay me a flat fee retainer up front if you want that option. And option C is other. You can put whatever else you want in there as long as it complies with the mandatory terms of the written agreement. And then I have the same language. If you go buy a house within 60 days after you fire me that I showed you, I have right to collect the commission. So I kept that same protection in there as well.
Brett, I have a question on that.
Yes, ma'am.
Who's going to police the people they show? I mean, we would have to pay somebody a salary to do that for us.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to hear from you. I mean, are you going to actually go check on every house you show?
You can't.
You're not going to know until after it's closed.
Yeah.
You bought it.
Yeah.
And then what are you going to do? You're screwed.
You can go after them. You can file a lawsuit.
I mean, who's going to do that?
I don't.
There are people who...
Yeah, exactly. Unless no. Well, you don't. So again, I put something on here for one of two reasons. If I think it's so, what was that?
The crowd roars.
Yeah. So if it's on here, it's for one of two reasons: either to set expectations or because I think it's material.
Discourage the buyer.
Discourage them from doing it. That's all it is.
My new motto in the last few years has been stop stepping over dimes to pick up.
Yeah. There you go.
Like you have to just let it go.
Yeah. Not worth it. And it's not a good look. You don't want to go suing clients. Not a good look. So, sue a builder. Yeah. If you want to sue someone, go sue a builder. Yeah.
You don't need her.
So, right. So it creates that, provides that protection for 60 days. Agency, this creates exclusive agency relationship. So they cannot go sign others. The next one, the touring agreement we have, does not create exclusivity. So this one creates exclusivity. Failure to close, again, I'm not going to go after money if you bust contract, but I want it in here so that you know this is a guardrail I want you to stay within. Right. I can. I'm not gonna, but I want you to know that it's there. So if you breach contract, our brokerage has the right to pursue commission. Equal opportunity, we're going to treat everyone equal. We're equal opportunity brokerage. Copy of the agreement. Whenever you sign this, you're going to get a copy of it. You're also going to receive a copy of the disclosure of brokerage duties, responsibilities as well. It's all one document. I didn't want to put two pages, so I put attached here. They're not, but they will be in practice. So that document of disclosure, brokerage disclosures are going to be attached to this document. It's going to be a 2-page document. And then additional provisions as well. Anything else you want to add to it as well. So this is going to be, again, let's...
And Brett, you're letting us all use this.
If you want.
I'm just checking.
Yeah, I mean, it's not... It's not...
Are you going to email that to us without us asking you?
Yeah, it's in the slideshow. So what I can't zoom out any further. That's here. Anyway, if I could zoom out far enough, you could see it's one document. It's not even the full page. There's a lot of white space. I think it's very unassuming. It's very easy to get through and talk about. And yeah, you can have some. I would prepare some funny jokes though, because I promise people are going to be like, I'd like to hear a funny joke, please.
Dance monkey dance.
Yeah. Dance monkey. So, all right, so we went through the full OREC buyer service agreement, all the disclosures. We went through a reduced hybrid but still full service written agreement. The last thing, and you know, kind of Zillow kind of, you love when they lead our industry into change, and they push this thing out really fast, very low friction, low teeth, compliant way to get into the door with someone. And so I wanted to create something very similar, something more specific to us, a couple things as well. But some of the benefits, very low friction, it's limited service, it's not full service, it's minimum requirements, so it meets the minimum requirements, the 4 mandatory provisions. It's non-exclusive, it's a shorter duration in termination options. It does not outline compensation, or it does, it says no compensation, you owe me nothing. And it sets expectation for future agreements. I think that's the most important part that the other ones that I've seen don't do. It sets expectation for future agreements. And in the sales process, this is a risk-free trial. I know it's difficult to pick a broker that you want to work with in this process. I want to build rapport with you and learn you and what you need. So this is a risk-free trial. Use me. If you don't like me, you don't owe me anything. And that's kind of that's what I wanted to create. Okay, so this is our touring agreement. Okay, same thing. This is half a page agreement. Very simple. Outlines the disclosure. So this is a limited service agreement. Basically, the way I wanted to build this, and we'll talk more about it in the strategy portion, is this is from meet till offer. That's when we're going to use this. Or from when we meet until I feel like I've built enough rapport to get you under a full service agreement. So it only outlines the pre-offer services we're going to offer you. So we're going to do buyer needs analysis, present estimated financials, discuss financing options, schedule tours of property, and tell funny jokes. And then it goes into buyer acknowledgement. So you're acknowledging you're not signing anything else to anyone else. Even though this does not create exclusivity, it doesn't say it's non-exclusive, but it does not state that it is. So it does not automatically create exclusivity. Duration is start on this date, end on this date. The other one was a 90-day if left blank. This is 30-day if left blank, just shorter, smaller, easier. You could do 7 days, 2 days, whatever you want. Compensation to broker. So this is the important part. No fee for the buyer consulting agreement. A broker shall receive no compensation from buyer or any other source under the buyer consulting agreement. Broker may not receive compensation from any source that exceeds the amount or rate agreed to in the buyer consulting agreement. So it was a weird, long, repetitive sentence, but it complied with all 4 mandatory provisions. That's why it's weird and looks like that. Section B is where we start setting expectations for future agreements. Section B says, If the broker is going to provide buyer with brokerage services beyond the buyer consultating agreement, such as writing an offer, buyer and broker will enter into a separate agreement for such additional brokerage services and additional compensation terms. The compensation the parties agree to for additional services are not set by law, are fully negotiable, and shall be documented in the agreement. So it's saying when it's time to write the offer, we're going to talk about what it looks like specific to the property that you're writing the offer on. Because by then, hopefully, we know the property, we know the price, we know the compensation offered. We can create a more specific agreement for you and that buyer. Disclosure, I'm reiterating. As a member of the National Association of Realtors, broker is required to quote an amount of compensation that is objectively ascertainable and not open-ended. In the event the buyer decides to write an offer, the buyer and broker reserve the right to enter into a new broker service agreement. So one of the provisions is you cannot receive more than what's in your agreement. This agreement says nothing. So I'm setting the expectation that whenever the time comes, we're going to expire this agreement and enter into a new agreement. And so I'm going back and forth on this. Maybe I'll take a poll. So I have a notice of cancellation at the bottom. Again, you have a question?
I'll let you finish.
Okay. So I have a notice of cancellation at the bottom. Again, further setting the expectation that this is a short-term agreement, and when we get to the point that you're ready to move forward with additional services, we just check this box, expire it, and move into our next agreement. So it just further, 3 times we're setting the expectation of a future agreement is coming. And when you're with that buyer, showing houses, doing whatever, you're having these conversations. You're talking about what that next agreement's going to look like, and they might ask you a question. You're like, I'd love to get into all that with you. If you're happy with me and I'm happy with you, we have a script here on the next slide. You can roll them into that next agreement. So this just further sets the expectation that this is temporary whenever it's time, because it already has a 3-day out. They can terminate at any time. It's not like I'm convincing them they can't. So it's another conversation. When the time comes, I've told you 3 times now that we're going to sign another agreement. The 4th time is when it comes, here's how we do it. Check this box. I'll put it in here with the other one. Move forward like nothing happened. I don't know if I'm going to keep that there or not because it makes the page longer. I'd like it to be a half-page agreement. I don't know. So who thinks I should keep it?
I like it.
You like it?
I think you should add that both parties agree to park wages versus buyer relations.
Sounds worse, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like both parties have agreed.
Brokers' jokes aren't funny.
Right.
Violation. You violated. Yeah, you violated the terms of the agreement.
Why don't you just set it up like the TRR, how they've changed it so there's not so many things. Just have it to where reference that, you know what I'm saying? Where it's like the buyer submits it, they sign it. If the seller agrees, they sign it. If they amend it, then you go down to the next.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll have to squish it.
Specifically because I would almost at the end of the appointment, like your very first appointment with them, you can say,
Do you want to move on?
Yeah, would you like to go ahead and sign your
great.
release, or would you like to move on to the next
Yeah.
job?
It also creates it creates the ease of I'll sign this because I'll just freaking sign right here and be done if I don't want it. So I think and then they like you during the showing, and you provide value and tell them about another house or whatever it might be, and now we're building rapport.
Yeah.
So that's
It's the second date invitation.
Do you have to wait 3 days though?
to text them.
Do you have to?
Sorry, I had to. I'm sorry. Sorry, go ahead. No, if they want out, you can get them out.
Right, but no, do you need to wait 3 days though in between signing this one to start a new agreement? To
No.
An offer? What if
So the other, it's not, now that you say that, it's not in here. So both these agreements all have mutual consent.
Yeah.
So if you mutually consent, it ends it right then.
Okay.
Only with written notice is there a 3-day minimum.
Okay.
Yeah, so if we both sign it, it'll expire. Yeah.
If you're firing your buyer and they don't agree, they have to
Yeah. I'm going to go buy something before this 3 days over. What's that? That'd be nice.
One question on new construction with this. Let's say I walk out of here, I go meet Joe, I go show him a house, I just met him, so I have him sign this agreement. We put showing at 4 o'clock, and I go home, and him and his wife want to go check out XYZ Builder. Builder rep's really good, signs them. He never called me because they were busy.
You can take it to the builder.
It says they don't owe me anything.
Oh, with this.
Well,
Yeah.
It says they don't owe me anything.
Yeah.
Can I amend? Can I still?
No.
But I mean, at that point, you wouldn't have provided.
Yeah,
comments, right?
well, at that, so that's no different. So that's what I wanted to create. I didn't want to create anything that's not any riskier or exactly what we're going through right now. So same thing happens here. It happens all the time. I've sat in a builder and then they've came back and called the builder that I sat at, and I have to fight for commission.
Is there a way we could still amend it or something?
Yeah, isn't there any additional provisions on this or no?
Yeah, right above the signatures.
Scroll up. Tim, I think in additional provisions, you could write whatever you want.
As long as it complies with the NAR settlement.
You had to do, like for you, for example, okay, as long as it complies
Thank
with
you.
the NAR settlement, and Brett says yes. So, but like for
I'm gonna get water. Hold on.
I have one question. I've probably asked this before, but like we're sitting at open house, and I just want to be clear. And like say at 4 o'clock, it's time to go, but this person wants to go look at the other house next door. Can I do that without signing an agreement?
It depends. Yes, it depends. Yeah, so it depends if use a builder, for example. Use Roush Coleman, for example. So our brokerage lists Roush Coleman homes, so you can show everything in that community because it's one seller and we have a right to list their stuff. So you can show anything without a buyer-broker agreement. Now, if you go to across the street to a different builder or to a existing home, you need some agreement. You're not performing a duty for the seller at that point. You're performing buyer duties, buyer services.
And so since everything is technically from the broker,
Yes.
the broker has everything. You can show every.
That's why a lot of people,
without any
exactly.
agreements at all.
So a lot of people don't think if it's not my listing, I can't do it. If it's your brokerage's listing, you are a representative of your broker. So you can show any brokerage house without a buyer broker agreement. So like, again, we had at our last event, we had Tara Levinson. She keeps 100 listings at a time, 70 to 100 listings at a time. All her agents can go show all her houses without any kind of buyer broker agreements because they're all under the brokerage, and they comply.
So does that apply to all our listings as well?
Every brokerage listing, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Very good.
Yep.
All right.
Okay. Question? Need more listings. You nailed it. Okay. So some strategies. So these are the three based on. If you remember the board, these are kind of the different strategies. We'll talk about what you might deploy and where you might be. So the three strategies I've come up with that I foresee, and I'm sure there will be a dozen more, is a touring agreement that goes into a full service buyer agreement with an offer, a touring agreement that builds rapport and then rolls into a full service agreement before an offer, just in the showings, or a full service agreement from the very beginning. Those are kind of the three scenarios I see I would recommend people using. So first one, touring agreement straight into a BBA with offer. So lead comes in, could be from a online lead, sign call, open house, referral, whatever it might be. Lead comes in, you say, hey, here's this touring agreement, let's go look at houses. Here's my limited service agreement, let's go look at houses. They find the house, and then you tour homes under that limited service agreement, which you can do for as long as you want. You don't have to do it for 7 days or 2 days. It can be up to 364 days if you want. Then when they find the house they want, you call the listing agent. You find out all the information you can about the seller, about the property, all that, what compensation is being offered. Then with the offer, you set those expectations of the buyer service agreement. You sign the new full service agreement with the offer. So if you don't like these NAR changes and you want everything to go back to the way it was, this is the strategy for you. Get a minimum low obligation, limited service agreement, build rapport, provide value. Then when it's time to write the offer, flip them to a BBA like you normally would and write the offer. That's all. That's the easiest, simplest, lowest friction, right? What's the word? Friction.
That also protects you that if you find the house and they're offering 4% or 6%, then you're creating
Exactly.
an agreement to write.
That's one of the key things about this is I don't know what the price is going to be. I don't know what the compensation from the seller is going to be. So let's figure that out before we agree to something. If we're going to do this thing, if it's really going to be transparent, we're really going to do this thing. Let me provide you these services. When it's time to provide you these services, hopefully you like me, and we're going to roll into these services. So Plus, if you're not already doing, like if you're not already calling the listing agent saying, hey, got a buyer who's interested, tell me about the house, how many showings, how many offers, blah. The more information you have, the more valuable you can be to your client, the more you can influence the situation as well. So call them, figure out what's going on, then create your agreements based on the scenario that you're in, not a future unknown scenario, a non-ascertainable scenario. Okay, pros of that is minimum required compliance, relationship-based approach. I want to like you and you like me. Let's go do this thing. Least difficult conversation for an agent to have. Very low commitment from the buyer, low friction. We should know what the compensation is at the time of writing the offer. So these are the pros. The cons, moderately higher risk of receiving no commission. However, it's the exact risk you've been operating under for the last however many years you've been in the business. If you do a good job, provide value, you're still going to get skunked on some things. It happens. But if you do it long enough, do it well enough, you're going to get overcompensated for what you actually do, I promise. And then must set additional future expectations. So not all expectations are set up front, like what the commission will be and duration, all that stuff. You have to continue setting future expectations. But it allows you to build rapport, develop a relationship, then have that tougher conversation, like a buyer-broker service agreement. The script, and this is something I'm building out for our group, so essentially I'm trying to, again, automate it. I'll kind of walk through the process shortly, but the idea is when the showing is scheduled, you're over the phone, text, whatever it might be, I would recommend a phone call. Before our appointment, I'm going to send you a showing prep email. It has a few resources in there so you know what to expect, but also has a short document that we need you to review before the showing. It's required that all realtors present it to buyers as of August 17th, so it just gives us permission to tour the home with you. Let me know if you have any questions, whatever. But that's what we're saying. It's a showing prep email. That's all it is. I just need you to know a couple things before we go walk through a house. And then in that, we have buyer resources. We have a video that describes what the document is. We just have resources for the buyer so that we're providing value before they even get face-to-face with us. I talked to Aaron Catron. They implemented something where they're kind of, I won't use the word blindsiding, but they're hitting the buyer with the agreement on the doorstep at the showing. And I can't decide if I like it or not. One, they're there. They're not going to not sign it. I'm here. I'm at the house. I showered for this. You know what I mean? It's like I'm going in. But it's also like, are you going to get that second callback is my question. So they said we're going to go with this until we see some negative feedback. I think a low friction automated process they can do from their phone beforehand, as long as it has to be a 90-second process. Otherwise, they're going to go on to something else. And so that's what we're trying to create.
And that's the touring agreement that you're going to be sending them prior, and then you're going to bring one with you for them to sign?
Nope. No, they're going to sign it prior.
Oh, sign it.
Yeah, it's going to come in a format that they can review and sign at the same time and watch the video and have the additional resources. It all comes in one email.
Are you going to jump through all these hoops before you find out if they're pre-qualified?
Yeah. Again, no different than what I've always done. You have, I think, again, you want to know if they're pre-qualified? Yes. You have to capture the business before it's even relevant. If people are asking if you're pre-qualified before I've even met you, in my opinion, it's like, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to work with you anyway. Yeah. Like, I need to decide to work with you, then let's talk about the steps. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's we have to build that rapport.
We've been doing a lot of online meetings. So
that's we're building.
A couple weeks
ago. We're building all of it. Yeah.
So Brett, did you say you're going to send them like a video?
I'll show you the process after this. Yeah. I'm very excited. I just hope it works. God, I hope it works. Okay. So the second so touring agreement, very low friction. Let's get in, then let's build rapport, then let's figure out what we're doing next. So the next option is touring, build rapport, then flip them into a full service. And this is like, I just want to get in the house with you, and then once I'm in the house, kind of like what Lisi said, after the showing, you can even flip him into the full service, or a week later, or a month later, or once it's like, damn, I've showed him 10 houses, and I better get this guy locked in, or this girl locked in, whatever it might be, you can flip him into it. So, same process, lead comes in, send them the limited service agreement, quick, easy, automated, get in the door, start showing houses under the limited service. Then, whenever you feel like you've built the rapport, you have that buyer consultation, you sign that full service agreement, then you start showing houses under the full service agreement. Now you've set those expectations for the future. When they find a house they want, you call the agent, get all the information, adjust your agreement if you need to, and then you write the offer. So pros, the compensation expectations are set earlier. So we talk about commission earlier in the process, not at offer, which I think is fine because we know the details. Possibly increases buyer commitment because you're having that conversation, they're agreeing again to use you, not just because you're the easiest, but because they want to enter into a new agreement. It protects against buyers buying houses that you've shown them, because that second agreement, the full service agreement, gives you that 60-day protection. The first one does not. Cons are getting more of a commitment from the buyer, which requires slightly more sales skills in front of the buyer. So that's a con in general. If you don't have those, go get them, and then this becomes easier. Everything gets easier. Don't wish for things to be easier. No, what is it?
Yeah.
Don't wish for things to be easier. Wish that you were better.
Yeah.
There you go. Go get better. Do more. Be better. So the strategy. So basically, you want to start the script for this strategy. You want to start this up front. You want to start if this is what you want to do. Again, I never did any buyer brokers. I'm going to ride that touring agreement all the way to the offer. I'm going to hope I don't get fired at some point in the middle. Right? That's how I've always operated. I've always had a ton of success with it. If you're the kind of person who's done it other ways and you're looking for an easier, lower friction way, here's something I could recommend. Set the expectation up front though. Hey, selecting an agent's a big decision, so let's just do this basic consulting agreement that allows us to discuss the market and tour homes. After a few showings, we should be able to feel closer to making a commitment decision to work together. So let's just go see some homes, but hey, in the future we're going to move into some additional services having these. And then now that we've been working together for a little while, I want to make sure I can provide you all the services that you'll need from me. Let's walk through this new full service agreement together. And then you just move it into it. So scripting, I hate scripts. Writing scripts makes me sick because I think of a million things that are dumb about it and that you should change. I like frameworks better than scripts. And so this is a jumping off point for your framework. Figure out what you say. It has to sound like you. If it doesn't sound like you, you're going to read it like I just did and they're going to walk out the door. So this is a framework, but these are the conversations you could and should be having throughout the process. And then the last one is the full service buyer broker agreement from the very beginning. Lead comes in and I say, hey, before we go anywhere, let's meet up at the office. Let's go to Starbucks. I want to walk you through the buying process, and then we do all the hard work up front, right? Then you go start showing houses under the full service agreement. You find the offer, or you find the property, call the agent, write the offer. So the pros are the compensation is set earlier. Possibility of increasing buyer commitment protects you against them buying a house you showed them. More disclosures set and more expectations set up front to protect you in the one-off situations. There is one paragraph in there that discloses to the buyer that we work with other buyers. Okay, well, that's not in mine, right? But maybe they get mad at you because they found out you have other buyers, and I missed that. That's my fault. So that could happen. That's a one-off situation. It's in there for some reason. Someone got sued or complained on, and now that paragraph's in there. So you do full service, you do OREC, that's all in there. Cons, getting the commitment from the buyer requires more sales skills, most likely going to lose opportunities. I think that's the biggest one. The more friction you create up front, the more opportunities are going to slip through your hands because now if you're crazy busy, if you just can't take another buyer, do this. If you can't take another client, you just don't enough time in the day, you can't spend all your money, there's just too much money to spend, do this. If you're trying to capture business, there's other ways, I think. My opinion, talk to your broker. So if we're doing the full service BBA from the very beginning, a couple of options. CITO, come into the office. MMAS, I thought these were funny, so I added them in it. Meet me at Starbucks. LCOZ, let's chat on Zoom. So this is how you can get together and have these conversations.
You heard it here first.
Heard it here, yeah. Can I trademark these?
Probably.
I stole them. Okay, so, and then the script, again, the framework is, I've got a buyer consultation system that works really well for my buyers. We just need about 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how many questions you have. I have a series of questions I like to ask to make sure I really understand what you're trying to accomplish. When would be a good time for us to meet? So you're just saying, hey, I got this freaking rock star system I run my clients through, and they all love it, and I'd love to run you through it. That's kind of the idea that we're trying to get across. So this is one. So kind of going back to that matrix, I kind of based on where you were and where you are, I think these are the strategies that you might like to deploy best and easiest. So these are where I see most people living. I think most people stay right here, which is I wrote one at offer, but I'm probably not going to go after anyone if I get stiffed somehow. But I'd like to have these protections and expectations in place. So this is probably where I see people. I think people who are more used to getting the BBA earlier on could go more towards build rapport and get the full service sign, but this is completely up to you. There's not a wrong answer. If you're the never showed without a consult and I always collect, that's fine. I wish I was like you. I'm not. That's way more protection for you, and I'm sure you make more money than me. I don't want to do that though. It's just not my personality. So wherever you're at, there's not a wrong answer, but figure out where you're at and which model, strategy, document is going to make your life easiest and get you more transactions. I thought there was a question slide sooner. Okay, discussing compensation. So one thing, I heard someone say this, I thought it was good advice. Don't just say, hey, if I can't get the 3%, I'll negotiate it down. Because it sounds like you're ripping someone off. Someone, like, are you ripping me off or are you ripping off the seller? Because you're just throwing a number out there that means nothing and has nothing tied to it or applied to it or no hard costs, no nothing. So the idea is, hey, my standard fee is 3%. However, if we're in a situation where the seller won't pay the amount, I won't let my fee get in the way of a transaction. So we can negotiate it based on the situation. Not because you don't want to pay it, not because the seller don't want to pay it, but because of the situation. But I'm not going to let my fee get in the way. These are verbal conversations you want to have. Don't put these in writing. It's way easier to have verbal conversations that we can readdress in the future. Verbally set expectations on possible scenarios for the buyer. So if you remember the OREC document, that says, hey, you can give money back to the buyer, you can give money back to the seller. It's like, Oprah, you give money, you give money. You can have those conversations, don't put it in writing. If there's money left over, we'll talk about where it goes, but we'll talk about that when the scenario arises, right? Let's not create problems for us in the future. Also discussing compensation, so careful with steering. I feel like I had to add this in here as a broker. Steering is still steering if you get permission to do it. So you can't just get permission to break a law, right? So even if the client's like, yeah, I don't want to see houses that don't, okay, I'm still going to present them to you because if I don't, I'm guilty of something. So just present them the information. Here's a house offering nothing. Here's a house offering something. They make the decision, not you. Does that make sense? They got to make the decision, not you. You can't get permission to break a law. Not how law works. I wish. Yes, Tim.
Just to clarify, because we talked about that in the past one, so it's not a good idea to say, hey, you want me to only show you property for X, Y, Z, show you
Correct.
regardless, that you think would be good for them to basically CYA that, hey, I showed you options you chose.
It comes down completely to what your enforceable threshold is. If I'm going to make my buyer pay, have those conversations up front. If you're not, doesn't matter because you're not going to go after it. You're going to negotiate what you can, and you're going to take what you can. But if you're going to go after it, absolutely have those conversations with your buyer up front. So it depends on your business and where you're at. There's no one answer. So, yeah, if I'm going to go after it, hey, just so you know, some of these houses might not be offering, and so you'll be responsible for the difference. You'll be credited what they offer, but you'll be responsible for the difference. I'll let you know what they're offering, so because it's going to affect your costs. So now you're going to have to adjust, buyer cost sheets and stuff. The other thing is vetting your buyer's cash reserves. Go.
I was just gonna say, what reminds me of that so much is we all have buyers who send us pictures of their houses through. Oh, I want this one, and they're like an FHA, and you're like, okay, but you can't say you can't buy that. You would never be like, oh, hey buyer, you can't buy that. We're not going. You would say, we have some things that we have to find out about this property. Will it fit your loan terms? Your loan terms say X, X, X. So in that opportunity, you just say, hey, let's find out how much cash you would need to have to purchase this home. Because we would have to find out what all your finances are going to look like on this, including commission.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to handle that and kind of connect the dots there.
Yeah. Everything is so situational. The idea that all this has to be addressed and then upheld and adhered to the day we meet them is crazy. Every situation's change. So create flexibility in your agreements is my So vetting your cash buyers. Work with a lender that you trust and you can talk to and you like, and just like you need to know if they have closing costs or if they need closing cost assistance, I'm curious if you're on that matrix where you're going to require payment from your buyer, I'd talk to the lender and ask if they have reserves in the amount to pay my compensation if I need it, if they need to. Now you can always ask the seller for credits and they won't be counted towards their interested party contributions, but you'd want to, IBCs, but you want to, if you're going to go after it, I would make sure, I would do some homework to make sure they have it. Okay, handling objections. So this is kind of with buyers, but this is more on the seller side. I think people are understating the importance of the conversations that have to have on the selling side. Everyone's focused on what's required for the buyers, but so much of this hinges on what's on the seller side and what expectations they receive. So handling objections, we're going to talk about some objections here in a second, but when you're handling objections, nip it in the bud, be firm, be confident. If the seller knows commission's on the negotiating table, it's going to be the first thing they reach for every single time. If you offer it, they're going after it immediately. So don't hem and haw around. Firmly and confidently explain the changes and the benefits of buyer-broker compensation and move past it. It's their decision. But if you then what are they going to do? Let's try it. Let's try 1% and see what happens. We'll go higher, but let's just try 1%. Let's try half. Let's not do anything. Let's just see if they ask for it. It's got to be facts, expectation, move past it. Make sense? Can't make them do anything. Do whatever they tell you to do, but you can advise them what's best for them. So some objections. This is an obvious one I've been hearing all over, and I'd like to, if anyone has any other objections that they thought were valuable that they've used, I'd love to talk about them. So I heard I don't have to pay agent commission after August. Melissa had one that said, let's just wait until after July so I don't have to pay 3%. Because he read CNN, and that's what CNN told him. So the keys with this: educate, don't defend. If you start saying, lawsuits, blah blah blah, it's terrible, it's so now you're backpedaling and you're the bad guy because you're defending the person who lost in a court of law. So challenge the information. Where'd you hear that? That's interesting. I hadn't heard that. Where'd you read that? They only read headlines if they read anything at all, and they have no data below the surface, so they're going to backpedal on what they said immediately if you challenge them. Where'd you hear that? I haven't heard that. And then you really just tell them the settlement really only made 2 changes. 1, buyer agent commission cannot be on the MLS, and buyer broker agreements are required. That's it. They did not stipulate who can pay what or how much can be paid at all. Nothing. It just can't display it on the MLS, and now I have to have an agreement with my buyers. That's all it was. So buyer agent commissions have always been negotiable. However, we've typically always paid some compensation to the buyer for a number of reasons. This is where you can justify and explain why we do these things. And hopefully, since you already backpedaled him once, he doesn't really have anything to stand on, he's going to say, that sounds good. He or she will say, that sounds good. So the way I explain it, that I've had the most success with, is buyer agent commission is a marketing expense. No different than professional photos, staging, landscaping, anything else you want to do to market your property and make it look more attractive on the market. So it's just a marketing expense. In some markets, we don't need to stage the house or do this or that because it's going to sell. In some markets, we need to do more because houses are sitting in this neighborhood or whatever it might be. So look at it as a marketing expense. Here's what I'd recommend based on what the other houses are offering. Does that make sense? So you're not paying someone else's client's fee. This is a marketing expense for us to gain exposure. So that's how I usually phrase it. It has a lot of success. And then set the seller's expectation. If they don't want to do whatever you're advising, okay, we can do that, obviously. I want to set your expectation. Whether we offer it or not, it's likely we're going to get a request for it. So just factor it in. And a lot of buyers don't have the ability to pay for it out of pocket, so it's likely going to come from us in some credit. That's what we're seeing in the market. That's not what's required. That's not the standard. It's what we're seeing in the market. Does that make sense? Has anyone else heard or done any other good objections handling to this? Has anyone heard this yet? Heard it yet? Yeah. So a couple of ours have. So that's how, it's a marketing expense. It's nothing more. You don't have to pay it. You never had to pay it. We don't have to clean the house or take professional photos. I do it because it's going to get more exposure, bring us more money, more buyers. So educate, don't defend. Do not backpedal on that. You're only going to look worse. Challenge the information and then justify what we're doing. Handling objections again. What is this? What if the seller wants to renegotiate the buyer agent commission after the home is on the market? So a scenario I see is I list my house, offer comes in one day. I could have offered that. What if we countered back at this? Or what if we did that? Or multiple offers come in. Let's ask these other, I don't have to pay this anymore, right? Oh, you never had to pay it. So what if they try to renegotiate? I've heard this once. What I came up with, again, would love to canvas it. There's two phases to a contract. If we market something and then pull it back, we run the risk of losing goodwill with the other agent and the buyer. Now we're renegotiating on something we already agreed to. We lose goodwill. There's two phases of a contract. There's the agreement, negotiation of it, and then there's the fulfillment of it. There's a 30-day process where we have to not piss off that buyer or they'll leave and go buy another house, right? So the idea is we don't want to lose goodwill. We don't want to make them villainize us on day one, and we don't want to renegotiate things we've already agreed to. And really what matters is your net, not what you're paying to your client. This gets us where we want to be, so it doesn't matter who gets paid. Does that make sense? So that's kind of don't lose your goodwill. We still have to get fulfillment out of this contract, and then net is all that matters. Those are two frameworks that I try to go within. Questions on that? Has anyone thought about renegotiating through the process? Because now that we have this cooperative compensation agreement, it's on the contract. So as far as I understand, a counteroffer could come across changing your commission on the counteroffer. And I don't know how you're going to convince you're going to have to convince your buyer to counter that term of the contract back. It's a very dynamic situation that no one really wants to be in, because now it's like, I'm trying to buy a home. Why are we talking about this? And now you put it on the contract, OREC. Now it's there, and now it's in front of everyone. So very dynamic conversation. So the more conversation you can set up front, as on the seller side, the less likely those conversations come up. Hopefully. Questions? Thoughts? Good.
Okay, in that scenario, if you have a buyer broker agreement, you called the agent, you wrote it in, it was 3%, whatever, blah, 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 you send the offer, they present to the seller terms of the offer, they want to negotiate, and they opt to shift commission, right? So maybe the price, closing cost, whatever, you get a counter back in that event, and the commission's been shifted. Because again, you called, they said this is what it is, you wrote it down, everything's signed, they counter it back, right? Because now the seller's changed their mind. So I guess my question is, because we all know that we can lower it, but we can't increase. How would you suggest we document lowering that? Just in a counter? Like we're just countering back on our commission now?
Yeah, if you're using that cooperative compensation agreement, it's a term of the contract, it's in the counter, title gets it, those are the terms of the agreement. Now it's on the settlement, all that.
Including it in the counter, commission would be. So what if now, I guess my follow-up to that would be, and the seller doesn't agree, so the buyer says, you know what, forget it, I'll just pay you an extra $3,000, whatever it may be. So the buyer says, just accept that, I'll pay you the difference. How are we altering our BBA at that point? Is it compensation?
What happens? So
Would you just?
no, you should have your BBA.
Right.
Yeah, and then that's where I guess you give your BBA to title and your cooperative compensation to title, and they put it on there.
And then the buyer's going to pay you cash. I'm just saying, if you get an agreement with your buyer,
it's just on the settlement. It has to be on the settlement statement.
Like a compensation agreement with your buyer, in addition to your counter, showing how you're going to get paid and handing over the title.
Yeah. Yep.
And to your lender.
And your lender, because if it's coming out of their pocket, it has to be on the settlement statement.
Because they're going to have to see the cash that they're having to.
Correct.
And they will have to. It's going to cause an issue if these things happen at the 11th hour. We'll have to get seasoned. The lenders will have to get seasoned funds.
Yeah.
And all that fun
That's
stuff.
super fun.
Or gift money. You have to go out and get a bunch of gift money from people to close. I just don't.
We're going to see a lot of gift money. Coming up.
Yeah.
So we are in one right now, and the house just appraised for substantially more than the contract price. the seller was, when we submitted our compensation agreement for higher compensation, they countered back that they wouldn't take it.
Oh, damn.
So I literally said, why can't we just have the buyer pay it now? We're in the middle of a contract. I can talk to you about this down here, but anyway, it was just a thought.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, if you're renegotiating terms of the contract and now commissions becoming terms of the contract, you essentially could be renegotiating. Because like as a listing agent, I'll drop my commission if I'm in the middle of a negotiation around.
Essentially what happens is you're crediting your client and then they do whatever they want to do with that money. That's what's happening.
The tricky part is
You're
for the
reducing-
buyer, and if they're getting a loan, all of a sudden now we're
Yeah.
having to disclose to the
'Cause-
lender, and we're having to go through potentially slowing down the contract. The lender is going to have to go through all the things with lender.
Yeah. The other difficult thing, we talked about this, is I'm negotiating my commission with someone that I can't talk to.
Right. Yeah.
I'm having to convince the seller to pay me, but I'm not allowed to talk to the seller. So it's just, you're creating an uphill battle for yourself if the listing agent is not setting expectations. You can't always do it, but that's going to nip a lot of things in the bud, is if we can continue to set expectations properly up front. Again, this isn't a conversation to artificially hold commissions up. It's not what we're talking about. We're talking about collecting the commission that we get our buyers to agree to. So a lot of that. And it's going to be weird when terms are negotiated, but commission's not. And we're not happy with where commission is, but I'm happy with the closing costs and the price and blah, 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 but we're still, I think agents are going to have to concede on a lot of stuff early on until some norms come through. So we can talk more about that specific situation.
Well, you're going to have to call the lender. Here's the thing that I'm bringing it up because you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in the middle of that negotiation and now your buyer's having to pay your commission when originally when you wrote the offer they weren't,
Mm-hmm.
then you immediately have to call the lender
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, heads up, this is where we're at. I'm negotiating this contract, and they said they'll pay it, and they allegedly have the funds to pay it. But if we sign, you know what I mean? Like
That's where, like I said,
is your commission now the hang up between?
yeah, and that's where you could discuss with the lender, vetting your buyer.
Right.
They agreed to this because I'm going to collect, and they agreed. Do they have reserves in the amount to satisfy this?
I would have that conversation the second you send that client over to a lender for a pre-approval.
After they get you a pre-qual, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So,
Brett, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I would also add, we are already seeing some listing agents, I don't want to throw out the word unscrupulous, but they are, they're getting 6% now, and they haven't told the buyer's agent until a settlement statement comes out. And they're using this for more ammunition than what they previously had. So I would highly recommend having those conversations with listing agents very quickly in the process.
yeah, as much as you can, yeah. Good. Any questions about objection handling, BBA strategies that we went through? We'll do more Q&A at the end. So some possible scenarios I thought were interesting I want to talk about, something that might be coming down the pipe, might make sense to start wrapping your head around, seeing what it looks like. Listing agents stop negotiating buyer agent compensation. So I've heard a lot of people that do business say that they're going into listing agreements and they're just negotiating listing side. And they say they're setting expectation about the buyer agent commission that will come down the pipe, but they're not doing it at all. So in those instances, you're going to have to negotiate your commission with the seller on day one through the buyer's agent to the seller, and hope that value is portrayed through that whole process. So it's just I think it'll just become a number maybe that we just kind of like, try this, let's do this, and there's not really value provided. So as we continue down this road, and if DOJ gets what they supposedly want, and they prohibit cooperation agreements entirely, we might move into a scenario where you have to become the I'm going to collect agent. Or lending's going to have to start changing some laws to where they can start rolling closing costs and payments into mortgages like we've kind of been under the books doing for a decade. So a lot of interesting things coming down the pipe. I think initially, I don't think a ton of stuff will change initially. I think we'll see commissions slowly creep down a little bit, just because I think sellers are going to try to negotiate it, initially anyway. Like, let's try 2.5%. Let's try 3% and see what happens. And then when they get offered 3%, like, okay, I like the offer, pay it. But I think they're going to slowly creep. I went through, they took this off, so I had to manually go through 500 transactions. And previously, Actually, I don't want to talk about that. Anyway, it's already happening, is what I'll say. It's been happening for 6 months, where commissions have been creeping down. Higher and higher percentage of properties are not offering 3% on the MLS. So I had it was almost 20% of properties didn't offer 3%. So it's already happening. Unless you're doing a huge amount of volume, you might not feel that 20%, but it is happening, and I suspect it'll continue to creep down. But what I tell people is, when I started 11 years ago, my average house was $110,000 less than it is now. So every agent makes an extra $3,000 now than what I made when I sold a house 11 years ago. So suck it up. Sell more houses. The other thing, I assume I can talk about this. They came out with it, EXP. I don't know if there's any EXP agents. Just came out and said they are not going to negotiate seller compensation at all. They're going to prohibit their agents from negotiating seller compensation at the listing agreement. So every EXP listing is likely going to require a cooperative compensation agreement, and you hope that agent talk to them about what you're going to be asking. So very big move by a big brokerage. Very interesting. So that could continue playing, and all these conversations will have to continue to be had. As long as cooperation agreements aren't outlawed by DOJ or something like that, I think a lot of this stays pretty normal. Extra documents, extra conversations, but stays pretty normal, I think. All right. Some supporting materials. Again, you need to really quickly, really rapidly provide value and start building rapport really quickly. So I would recommend having some sort of page on your personal website. Your brokerage have some sort of page that has content for buyers. And so it's going to have videos that talk about what the agreements are, what happened with the NAR settlement. It's going to have booklets, anything that can provide value to a consumer. And so this is something, if it's something you're going to be saying over and over and over again to every buyer, put it in a video. And that way you can clearly and concisely convey your message, and it can be on the internet. And you could send that video to them and then reiterate with them when you see them. Or you can say it and then the video can reiterate with them when they watch it. Create videos that clearly and concisely articulate what's happening, because in the moment you might not be able to pull that script out perfectly. But if you can write the script, record it, you can clearly articulate it, makes it a lot easier to absorb. Also, I heard this idea a while back of something called binge content. And so it's like if I start a brand new account and I just put like 50 videos of me up on day one. The idea is I'm not trying to get a ton of views or crush the algorithm or anything, but when someone finds me, oh, good grief. My bad, we're late, I know. You can just say it. But the idea is if I can put a bunch of content out there, then when someone likes me, if they get a little taste of me, then there's something for them to go learn more about me. Learn more about our brokerage, learn more about what we offer. But if there's just one video that's 60 seconds and they watch it, now they can't learn any more about me or experience me anymore. So put 20, 30 videos out there, however many you have that are valuable, so that when they find you, because think of any time someone's scrolling through whatever social media platform, you see something you like, before I follow anyone, I'm going to go to their page and watch 2 or 3 more posts on it, see if it's something I think interesting. If it is, I'll follow it. But I want to see what else they have out there. Was that just one-off good video, or do they have good content? And so if you can create what they call, a binge content, something for my buyer to go through and watch like 5 things about me. Then when they see me, then it's like they know me already because they've watched me on video for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So videos, booklets, content for your buyers, links, whatever it might be, the more you can provide to them, the more of a rapport you can build quicker, the easier these conversations become. In video, it's incredible how easy video builds rapport one direction. People feel like they know you. Mindset, this is one of the last things we'll kind of talk about here. I said this is our last thing. I think it's important. So Charles Cooley said, "I am not what I think I am. I am not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am." And so a lot of people put their objections and their fears on other people, and they reflect it back on themselves. And so if you go into a listing appointment, or if you're trying to talk to someone about doing business, you're going to overcome your objections, not their objections, is what most people do. And so if you can be clear about what's going on here, be clear about your value and what you're doing, and don't put your fears. The vast majority of consumers have no clue what NAR even is, or that they owe anyone $418 million. No idea. So once this news cycle is gone, Most people are going to get their information from professionals when we're sitting down in front of them talking about buying or selling houses. So don't go into it saying you're probably wondering about the NAR settlement, you're probably wondering I'm going to give you this. They don't have a clue. They don't know. Don't put your fears on them. Don't put your objections on them, okay? If you're a good salesperson, ask questions, overcome their objections. I wanted to run through, you want to do questions or you want to do what do you want to do? Questions. Okay, I saw there's like 13 more questions. If anyone has any, throw them out too. This one was easy. If you host an open house for another realtor, that's a different brokerage. Do you have to have a BBA ready for people to sign? No. You are still performing duty for that brokerage, for that seller. I've been told you do not need to do that. However, if you show them to another property, you do, because now you're performing a buyer service. Here, you're performing a seller service.
Isn't there an argument to be made that if you're showing a house, you're doing the seller?
You're holding it open. You're not touring.
If you're showing a house, you're touring a house, you're trying to sell the house to the seller. So.
Yeah, I got the answer I wanted, so I didn't dig. That's how I did it. And I got it in writing. OREC. OREC and Oakmar. So if you go watch our the video we did back in May, that was a question we asked as well. So OAR and Angelina and MLS also answered the same. Can commission be addressed in the current residential sales contract? Do we foresee revisions in the contract and future address commission? So it is. So that supplement is a supplement to the contract. So for all intents and purposes, it's page 8 of the contract. So the answer is yes. However, what I think I'm going to do is take the 11 lines, turn it into 2 lines, and put it in my additional provisions. So it's one less document. We just talk about it. It's easier, faster, less friction. I went the wrong way. Okay. Current BBA reads that the buyer will pay the commission and any amount given to the seller will be credited back. Will this be reflected on the settlement statement? Yes. So whatever the buyer is paying will be on the settlement statement. It'll have to be because the lender will have to see it. And whatever the seller is paying, the seller will be paying on the seller. So there's 2 sides, buyer and seller side. They'll be on their own side. So yes.
The second part of that, though, I'm also very interested in.
Will this be reflected on the settlement statement, and will the lender have to prove? Yeah, they won't have to prove they have the funds. We'll have to approve it. I mean, title sends numbers to lenders 3 to 5 days before closing. Lender approves the numbers, sends it back. Normally timely, right? They're normally waiting on you. Yeah, always waiting on you.
Never the lender.
Lenders, no. Can we contact the listing agent to ask about commission? Absolutely. You're going to have to. It might be out on social media, it might be on flyers, might be on the sign. This is the best way to do it. And you can have a verbal conversation. And when you have a verbal conversation, you can dig and poke and prod and get more information, right? So seller's offering 2, but I told them they're probably going to have to do this, so if you ask that, okay, easier conversation now. But if I just see, oh man, 2, whatever. So have a verbal conversation, you learn more about the situation. I think it's important to address the buyer is essentially always the one paying for the commission. Seller provides credit, then buyer pays the agent. How will this be presented on the settlement statement? It won't be presented like that. It'll be presented by whoever's paying it, because that's who's paying it. The reality is, it worked really well for 100 years. The person with the most money is the equity. That's where the cash is in equity. So I'll pay the cash, you give me the price, and then I'll pay it. That's the way it worked. Buyers don't have a ton of cash. They have what they need, but they typically don't have a ton. So get the payment from who has the cash, and then give them what they want in the terms of the contract, which is price, right? I'll get paid more, but there's more fees coming out.
So with that, right now, I'm sorry. Hi.
Oh, there's a baby.
Okay, so right now, on a settlement statement, the commissions for buying agent and selling agent are on the seller side. But the way the buyer broker reads is that the seller is providing the buyer a credit for their commission to the agent.
That's how it's always read.
Right. So shouldn't it technically, though, with all of this, it's very upsetting.
Yeah, me too, buddy.
Shouldn't it essentially, though, especially if we're in a situation where the buyer is having to pay a portion, shouldn't it read as a charge to the seller, then a credit to the buyer than a charge to the buyer?
Technically,
I mean,
probably. Are you
more
gonna?
on your side of it,
I don't.
you guys.
But it's always read that, and it's never reflected that way. So, again, kind of back to what I was saying is this is how it's always worked. You got the cash. I'll give you this number from a bank, and then the fees get paid out of the cash. Because the bank won't give a buyer cash, right? They just give them debt. So it just comes out of the number, and that's why if you look back at I don't have it up. It says in the cooperative compensation agreement, it says commission will be taken out of the final sales price in the OREC agreement. So it's still coming out of the equity. It's just I think it stays. I don't know. You're the one that will have some.
People smarter than me will be the one.
Okay. So that falls under the we don't know yet column. That column is growing.
But I can buy you lunch.
Yeah. Got attorneys for that. What if the buyer's agent is charging a transaction fee and they don't disclose it on the OREC BSA? Technically, they can't charge it. If you don't disclose it, you can't charge more. You can't receive more from any party than what you disclose on that agreement. So if you don't put it on there, even if it's on the cost of buyer but not on the BBA, you can't charge it. You can't receive it. My understanding.
Would you mind posting that daily?
No, that's your fight. In compensation co-op, can the buyer rep ask for more than what the seller is offering? Absolutely, and I think this is what we're going to see more of. So if seller is only offering 2% or 1% buyer cooperation agreement, you can go in and ask for whatever you want. And then as long as it's not more than what you asked for in your BBA, then you accept whatever you negotiate. So yes, you can ask for more than what's offered.
Did you ever get an answer on the turnaround time of creating a new BBA? If, like, how specific you come in at your agreement's 2, but you want that house is offering 3.
Canceling one.
Yeah, so you just cancel. So my understanding is you cannot amend, you can't get paid more and you cannot amend it. So there's a big argument, and I've heard 2 people say 2 different things. 2 very smart people, very qualified people say 2 different things. You cannot get paid more than what's on the agreement. But contract law, basic United States contract law says I can amend any agreement. But we are not complying with contract law here. We are complying with a settlement. So supposedly you're not allowed to amend your buyer-broker agreement. The easy workaround is expire it, write a new one. Now it's a little friction there because you have to get a signature on the expiration. You got to hope they move forward and don't change their mind in between that 30 seconds that we're signing 2 documents. But if there's rapport, if there's value, if we're doing a good job, we move forward. We set that expectation, we move forward. But my understanding is that you cannot amend it. But amending it's the same thing. You need their signature to amend it. So you're in the exact same situation. So it depends on who you want to listen to. The president of the MLS, who is the police for all intents and purposes of this situation, says you cannot do that. Other attorneys say you can't infringe upon constitutional rights, but MLS disagrees. So do what you want to do. Talk to your broker. Unless I'm your broker. If you have If you have a cooperative seller or a listing, an uncooperative seller or a listing agent who won't pay buyer's agent commission, would it be possible to suggest up the sales price? Absolutely. Just like anything, again, it's all coming out of one thing. It's coming out of the sales price. The tricky part is if you explain it too much in the contract, well, a lender's going to see it and an underwriter's going to see it and they're not going to like it. Same thing we've always done. We've always rolled closing costs into a price, and if the appraiser wants to be a dick, they're going to bring it back down. They're going to take your closing costs away. If the underwriter sees it, they're not going to let you do it. If I ask for $5,000 and then go up $5,000, it's pretty clear what I'm doing. So you can do it. How you do it, and what lenders and underwriters and appraisers do when they see it it's in the column we don't know yet. But yes, I think that's what will be more common is we're just going to ask for more concessions from sellers and we're going to have to raise prices to compensate for it. What is the retainer fee? If we get paid up front, can we take that to the bank or does it need to be held? My understanding is it is a fee. It's not any sort of, Yeah, no earnest. It can be. It is a fee that has to be paid to your broker. You cannot collect it, just like any commission. So if you charge a retainer fee, it's got to go to your broker. Do not take money from a buyer and go put it in your bank account. Do not do that. Not because I want it, but because you will get in trouble and you will lose your license. So anything you get paid, retainers, transaction fees, has to go through your broker. Figure out with them what they're going to take out of it, if anything, and they'll give it back to you. But I believe it's a fee that can be spent. You're not holding it. As long as it's not stipulated that can be returned for any reason, it's a fee, is my understanding. But the more you outline that, the better. Can we pay a showing assistant to show homes on our behalf without signing a new agreement? Yeah, so your agreement is with the brokerage. That buyer is signing an agreement with the brokerage, not with you. So if you have another agent in your brokerage, they can work with that buyer too. Does that make sense? Every agreement is with your brokerage. There's no agreements with you. Even though your name's on it, belongs to the brokerage. What is this going to do to appraisals? We kind of talked about that. Appraisers are traditionally a hard-nosed group of people, from my experience. They're not going to be real accommodating. And so if you try to just jack the price up by 3% and say seller owes me this, I just have an assumption. I mean, it has to comp out, right? There has to be support for the price. Until banks start allowing you to roll it into your mortgage, which may happen in the next 5 years, it still has to appraise, and an appraiser can still knock it down.
What are they doing though for the homes? I always feel like appraisers kind of look at homes when they're appraising and just know that there's probably 5 or 6% commission.
Exactly, yeah.
But then there's
Baked
homes
in.
that are offering 2% to the listing agent and 0. Like, is it going to?
So that's why you can't, they won't know. It won't be disseminated, so they don't know. So has anyone ever gotten called by an appraiser and saying, hey, did your seller give any concessions on this deal? Yeah. So sometimes they have to do homework if they're a good appraiser and trying to justify something. So they might call you and say, hey, what seller comp did you offer? Did you do any concessions? And you can tell them, and that will affect that appraiser's value. But the vast majority of appraisers are probably just going to slap a value on it and kick it out the door. So we don't know. It completely depends on the appraiser. Yeah. But yes, that is a concession. And when everyone pays 3%, you don't have to factor it in. But if it's all different, you need to start factoring it in because it's essentially a seller concession.
It makes sense that they would need to see it then.
Or at least ask them, yeah. They can't see it because that's illegal, or that's against settlement, but they can ask about it. Are the cooperative compensation agreements mandatory? Will it best practice? I think this was the first one we had, right? Okay, so we're back. Nice. Good work, everybody. The answer is no, they're not mandatory. It might be a best practice to start throwing them out there. Again, when you have whole, I think EXP's got 1,100 people, 1,000 people or so in Oklahoma. I don't know what the Oklahoma City is, but that's a lot of people that are not going to be negotiating buyer comp for you. So this might just be a best practice. You just throw it in, set the expectation with your client. Hey, here's a BBA. We're going to throw this out there and see what the seller's offering. And that's where you can have a conversation where, depending on what your enforcement threshold is, you might say, hey, I'm going to take whatever they give me. We're going to take it. But if it's below this, you could verbally tell them a minimum of some sort. You can work stuff out verbally, obviously. And once you know the situation, it's easier to have those conversations. So, again, that goes in the column of we don't know yet. We'll see what people do. Okay.
In that retainer fee that you were talking about, on B on this new, it says that amount, if they buy a house, will be credited towards the house payment, but otherwise you keep it. So when the question was, do you just get to keep it? Obviously, if they don't buy a house, yes, but if you're crediting, do you have to, is it like earnest money? Or,
did it say it'll credit?
It says used towards. That's my understanding on that B, on the new wire broker.
On the retainer, so it'll be used towards?
What the seller offers?
No, on the new OREC buyer broker agreement?
Yeah. And I honestly, I totally could be reading it wrong.
No, I think I agree with you. I think it goes towards the end amount.
Yeah, it does.
Oh, so in that, okay, so it's still a fee. As long as it doesn't state that it's going to be returned in the event of a busted contract.
No, it
So-
doesn't say that.
It was in the BBA?
Yeah.
To your buyer, how you work it. So if you're asking for a retainer fee, you're gonna have to outline how you're going to ask for
Payment shall be considered non-refundable retainer fee.
Right, but see right above that, upon execution of the agreement, which amount shall be applied towards compensation upon closing?
Oh, so yeah, if it does close, it goes towards, and if it doesn't close, it's non-refundable.
They just deduct that?
They just deduct what they charge, yeah. Because if it doesn't close, you keep it, it's non-refundable. If it does close, it's credited off their settlement statement, yeah. I didn't catch that.
So you're not getting retainer income.
You're gonna pay me 10 grand. No matter
You can
what
still do
pay.
both, but it's not in addition to. Yeah.
They just meant how you
If that doc is what you're gonna give it to title, then would you need to provide a receipt that they paid it?
Well, it just comes up to what title wants.
Okay.
We said we weren't giving this.
Because most brokerages submit DAs, or they just get one check. So the DA typically comes with a broker.
DA maybe, okay.
Yeah.
It'll be different to the cash buyer if you have finance.
Yeah, lender requires certain stuff, yeah.
You're gonna see it, and title's gonna have to see it.
Yeah.
It's all gonna come down to like how they're paying for the house and how they're gonna.
So I was going to walk through what my version of a frictionless document is. Hopefully it can give someone some inspiration maybe. So, okay. So the system that we're creating for our brokerages is when an agent meets a lot going on. Okay, so when an agent meets a buyer, has a conversation, gets a showing scheduled, our agent is going to go to this website and fill out information about the client. And this is what's going to send the automation off to the client. So it is going to be, so whenever you meet the client, you choose which type of BBA. I'm going to do a limited service because it's faster. We're going to do the start date of the BBA, the touring agreement. We're going to do the expiration. Any additional provisions, if you want it to just be for new construction, whatever, you can put that in there. And then you put your email address. And then you submit it. So they're going to receive an email that says Copper Creek Real Estate Showing Prep. And this is where they're going to click on the button. It's going to take them to the document and to the video. They're going to go here. They're going to watch a 60-second video that outlines what the document is, what they're signing, why they're signing it. Then they're going to go in here and see a link to Copper Creek Real Estate Buyer's Guide, more additional content for them to look at, review, again, kind of that binge content. And then step 2 is we're going to go down and review the 2-page document and sign it. So here's the consultation. It's going to start on the 25th and the 31st. Additional provisions I put for new construction. You can put whatever you want. And it has my name, but it'll have the buyer's name and the buyer's signature. They'll sign it, go down to the duties, sign it too, and then finish. And now it will get emailed back to me. So whoever the agent inputs it puts their email at the bottom, and then as soon as they sign it, gets shot back to that agent. So it's a lot easier than sending talking through it, sending it through Dotloop or Transaction Desk or whatever it might be. There's a video, explanation, buyer content, and then a signature right there. And then it's supposed to come back after I sign it. There it is. They get it, and it says, oh, this is me for signing it. The agent gets one. So that's them receiving a copy of it. And then I get this as the agent. And it says if I click the 3 dots, I can download it and put it into Dotloop. So now, really quickly, they reviewed it, signed it, and I got the signed document back. So this is kind of that, if I'm meeting someone, hopefully in a 60, 90-second process, they learned about why we're doing this, what they need to do, what they need to expect, sign it, because it talks about how there's no teeth in this document. I just need it to, in a very articulate way. There's no teeth in this document. We need it just to show houses. Then they sign it, sends it back. Now I can go show houses to them for as long as I put the expiration on. So rather than, like we talked about the Tulsa group, getting there in front of a house and having a document and having to physically sign this document, I think that creates a lot more friction. Maybe not right then because they're going to sign it, but they said they've had a few people call back the next day, ask for a copy of it, and then expire it. So you're going to get those people, obviously, but I think it's easier, faster. You set the expectation. You're not blindsiding someone at a property. So this is what we're doing. If you have any questions about this, I can explain it or walk people through it. But this is what we're at the brokerage going to be doing for those quick touring agreements that we're trying to get in the door with people. again, low friction is what I'm doing. So last slide. If you have any additional questions about this, that's the cell phone number that's been texting you updates. Have questions specific, ask. I'll give you as broad or as specific as an opinion as I can as a broker or your broker. NAR posted this, or sent this email out yesterday, I think. August 1st from 2 to 3, August 5th from 11 to 12, and August 15th from 3 to 4. They are doing a 1-hour webinar on NAR changes. I'm sure it will be infinitely helpful, just like the OREC one was, but you might as well hear what they're saying and what they're thinking. So when I send this out, these are hyperlinks. When I send it out to everyone, you can click on it, go learn more, and register on it. Thank you, guys.